With the recent news that Khorne, Ogres and Greenskins will be the subject of the next DLC for Total War Warhammer 3, many were confused, especially with the Greenskins getting in there, because their campaigns and army is in pretty good shape, to be honest. They don't really need an update as much as some other factions, so here's the 5 factions I think are most in need of some love. So who's it gonna be? Who's it gonna be? Tomb Kings is my first choice. They're a faction that's had no major changes or rework since their release many years ago in Warhammer 2, and as such their campaign mechanics are a bit dated, like the Books of Nagash, which isn't a terrible mechanic, but the sheer distance that you have to cover to get some of these is pretty crazy. Not to mention that some of the rewards for getting them are kinda lackluster as well. So with no way to fast travel around the map, this system is just kinda tedious. You don't want to spend 20 or 30 turns to go and get some of these books. And then we've got the Canopic Jars system tying into the Mortuary Cult, which again is a fine system. It's not too bad. It could maybe use an update, maybe some better rewards. But I think the biggest problem for the Tomb Kings lies in their recruitment, which is of course mostly free. You just have the unit caps to contend with, and these can be upgraded in various ways, but one of the main ways is construction and certain buildings that give you more unit cap. Like this one, which only gives you 1 unit of Ushabti. You have to build 1 entire building slot of building for 1 unit of Ushabti, which you can upgrade to get another unit, but only the Great Bow version. That's quite simply not enough, especially as Ushabti kinda suck anyway, but more on that later. But yeah, it's kinda ridiculous that if I want 4 units of Ushabti, I have to make 4 of these buildings, for example. And I noticed how bad the Tomb Kings felt, especially when I did a Constructs-only playthrough for a video. This was really hard to actually make this army that good. With the Beastmen and a Minotaur-only army, you can make that army absolutely insane. You can make Kroxigors absolutely insane. You can make Ghosts of the Vampire Counts absolutely insane. My most recent one, the Rat Ogres, you can make them absolutely insane. But the constructs of the Tomb Kings, didn't really work. Nowhere near as powerful as those other armies could get. No matter how many buffs I stacked from Lords, Heroes, Necrotechs from the technology, all that stuff still didn't make for a very good construct-only army. And of course, that's not how you're supposed to play the Tomb Kings. You're meant to use the skeletons and the infantry and stuff. But it seems like there's too much of a restriction from the unit caps on the constructs for what they can do. They're pretty strong, but they're not crazy strong that they need to be so limited by such small unit caps. Although there are some that are much stronger than others, like the Ushabti Great Bows. These can be very powerful. The Sepulchral Stalkers are pretty good for what they can do, but some I do think are pretty bad. Like the Scorpion, its animations are so crazy it just doesn't really seem to do a lot. And the Ushabti, who look like they should be an absolutely terrifying unit, but they have how much? Only 23 melee attack. Look at the freaking size of it, and look at the size of its weapon. How is it missing so much? Because that's essentially what melee attack is, whether you hit or miss. Apparently these are really bad at hitting things with their massive long weapon. It makes no sense. They're also the only monstrous infantry in the game that don't have the siege attacker trait for some reason. Again, they're just rubbish at hitting doors, I guess. So definitely some love needed for some of these constructs, but the rest of the army is kind of okay. You got some good infantry in there in the Tomb Guard. You got some decent cavalry, missiles, artillery. Their unique battle mechanic could use some love though, the Realm of Souls. This just really isn't that great. You get a bit of healing every so often when your boys die and whatever, but if you do the math on how much healing that actually is, 0.20% of a unit's health for 7 seconds, that's 1.4% of a unit's health healed, which is basically nothing and useless. Of course, it's on the whole army, so it kind of adds up, right? But still, 1.4% of health, meh. At the second tier, you get the same amount for 14 seconds, which works out at 2.8% of a unit's health will be healed. And at tier 3, same again, but for 21 seconds, which will give your units 4.2% of their health back. So all in all, by the end of it, you'll have healed about 8% of all of your unit's health, which I guess kind of sounds like a lot, but I really don't think it is, and I don't think it helps that much, especially when you think about the units that it's going on. A, if a unit already has full health, then the healing is pointless, and B, do you know what happens when you give a unit of skeleton warriors 8% of their health back? Absolutely nothing, because they're shit. So it's not really helping them at all, because they kind of don't do a lot anyway other than get in the way and die. That being said though, if you're giving Tomb Guard or your constructs their health back, well, that is a bit more meaningful and they can do a bit more with that extra health. And there's many ways that they could improve this, simply by increasing the amount of healing it does, or simply by changing it so that you can actually just use it as a heal to pick the units you want to heal for a larger amount. that would probably be a pretty simple and good solution, but also the Tomb King's Lore of Magic, the Lore of Nehekara, is still pretty crappy as well. It's never really been that great of a lore book, so that could use some improvements. And then there's the fact that the Tomb Kings in the old world tabletop game have been updated. They've got new units in their roster, like this Necrolith Bone Giant, which obviously isn't in the game. So yeah, lots to do with the Tomb Kings there to make them brilliant. And speaking of brilliant, they are the sponsor of today's video, which no, isn't a website about me, silly. Brilliant is a place where you can learn by doing, with interactive courses on maths, data analysis, programming, and science. And you can start from wherever you're comfortable. Maybe you're a bit of an orc like me, so you can go basic, or you can get to the more advanced stuff straight away if you wish. The courses are laid out in a very simple linear format. You work your way through the lessons, which are very clear and concise, very nicely laid out, which I find does help with your ability to focus on the task at hand. And as I mentioned, it is interactive, so you'll always be clicking or typing something, and if you do get things wrong, there is an explanation button so you can see exactly where you went wrong, which is very helpful. So if you want to get a better understanding of the world, develop your critical thinking and problem-solving skills, which might be useful for everyday life, work, or even games, by the way, then Brilliant is a brilliant platform to check out. You can get it on all your devices as well, even your phone, so instead of scrolling through Discord or Reddit learning absolutely nothing about anything, maybe try this for 10 or 20 minutes every day and see how much smarter you get over a year. You can be a genius too, just like your boy Einstein. If you want to check it out, you can use the link there, brilliant.org/Zerkovich, or use the QR code here if it's easier. And while there is a free version of Brilliant to use, it's only limited access to the lessons. If you want full access, there is a monthly or annual subscription, which you can try out for 30 days for free with my link, and you'll get 20% off the annual price. Thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Next, we have the one and only Vampire Counts, the last remaining base game Warhammer 1 faction that could do with some love, although it's not in great dire need of it. They also have the Books of Nagash mechanic again, so same issues there. And then they have the Blood Kiss mechanic, which is kind of okay, but maybe a little bit simplistic for what some factions have nowadays. I imagine they could do something a little more intricate and a little more interesting, perhaps around the same idea, or maybe just something new would be better. I'm not a huge vampire player, so if you are, let me know what you think. Do you like these things? Do you think they could be better? Would you rather see something else? I don't really know what vampire players love, whether they hate this or not. Let me know. And then, of course, there's the Raise Dead mechanic, which still fits the vampires really well. Decent system, maybe some tweaks here and there, but otherwise, I think this is mostly fine, I'd say. Vampire Counts are more just a faction that need an update just because they haven't had one in so long, not that they necessarily desperately need one. And it's the same story with their army as well. Their army, while still very old and not really had any new units added to it, it's kind of fine. If crappy units get in the way and do what they're supposed to do, you still got some of the best units in the game and things like Blood Knights. Still got some of the strongest lords in the game with lots of magic. So their army overall doesn't have any real glaring holes that they need to do anything about. If anything, perhaps anti-large is something they could do with more of. They do have some good options in that arena, the Blood Knights, the Terrorgeist, but they don't have any missiles, which is one of the best anti-large tools out there. And not that I think the Vampire Counts need any missiles. Their whole thing is to not have any missiles at all, although obviously you can get the Sylvanian crossbows. But for the most part, vampires should stay missile-less, I think. Maybe just something like Graveguard with halberds, or Crypt Horrors with great weapons to make them anti-large. Other than that, I think just some new toys for vampire players to play with is all they really need. Next, the most unloved monogod chaos faction, Slaanesh. Alongside Khorne, the Slaanesh faction still only has one legendary lord to choose from, and by the powers of deduction, with Nurgle and Tzeentch having updates and Khorne getting an update soon, it's natural that only Slaanesh is going to be left after that. And honestly, I'm not a Slaanesh player. I don't think I've even played a Nakari campaign on Ulth 1, so I don't have much of an opinion on whether the mechanics are good or bad. You've got the summoning of disciple armies and the devotees. This kind of stuff seems fine to me. As I say, I haven't really played it though, so Slaanesh players, let me know by all means. I think people are quite fond of seductive influence that allows you to mess around with the vassals and stuff, and then you've also got the ability to seduce units away from other armies for the battles. That's really nice. So for the most part, in my uninformed opinion, Slaanesh's campaign mechanics aren't really too bad and don't really need too much done. The army, however, is on the smaller side in terms of roster size compared to the other monogods, so obviously they need some new units to catch up there. They've only got Nakari as the legendary lord. Of course, there's Azazel and Sigvald, but those are from the Chaos roster. No legendary hero either. Their army is mostly decent, but there's maybe some issues with some of their key units, their demonettes, their seeker, cavalry and chariots, the fiends, these high mobility, high damage units that are kind of supposed to be glass cannons, right? They do a lot of damage, but they don't have much in the way of defenses, but their defenses are maybe a little bit too lacking and they just go down so easy before they can really do anything. Perhaps something as simple as just more HP for those units would make them tougher and more survivable, or maybe just bigger unit sizes. But yeah, these units supposed to be the staple of of their speed and aggression, and yet they just kind of seem a little lackluster. Whenever I face them, they're always pretty easy to run through. One big cav charge into demonettes, and they're mostly done. Missiles, magic, you can take them down in many ways very easily because they got no goddamn armor. Other than that, their army's not too bad overall, maybe lacking in the anti-large, much like the vampire counts a little bit, or at least not having anything tough enough to really hang in there with some of the tougher large enemies. But yeah, we can guess Slaanesh is probably on the cards for an update early next year. Next, I think it's high time, my boys. Norsca got themselves an update. Another OG Warhammer 1 faction that just hasn't had anything for a long old time. Now, their campaign did suck for a long time in Warhammer 2 and 3, but they did update it so that now ports give you a shit ton of money, and honestly, it's kind of too much money. You can see I'm getting 800 there, plus 60%, so I'm getting over 1,000 per one of these ports, and I've got like 12 of them, so it's just crazy money. And it doesn't really fit Norsca to be getting money passively like this. They're called raiding ports. So, okay, we're getting the money from raiding at sea. Well, why don't you just give us a mechanic that actually allows us to raid at sea and rake in some money that way, or to do something to enemy port settlements and get loads of money from them? Something would be better than this anyway. This was obviously just a bit of a band-aid solution to quickly make the Norsca campaign a bit better, but something more interesting there could be really cool. And then you've got the sacrifices to the crow, the snake, the bull sack, whatever. I think this mechanic is fine. You obviously get that from going around and raiding other people, which is a very Norscan thing to do, so that's all good, I think. And then we have the monster hunts, of course, for Norsca. This is a cool mechanic. I still think this holds up well. Some of these quest battles that you have to do are actually quite tough as well. I think in Warhammer 3, some of the quest battles went a bit soft. They're a little too easy. So all this really needs is a Warhammer 3 update, to be honest. It only goes through Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 monsters. You can see we got a Phoenix and a Carnosaur, but there's no Warhammer 3 monsters for the Warhammer 3 factions, so to see those added would be nice. Just more monster hunts, basically. As for the army and the roster itself, I think maybe, dare I say, that Norsca actually has the best faction that's aged well. Even though they haven't had anything added to their roster in 5+ years, they don't really feel like they need anything. They've got a really good complete roster. Great infantry, strong monsters, anti-large. They got some missiles, those anti-large missiles, the javelins, very strong. Their monster options, trolls, fimis, mammoths, skinwolves, all very good. Actually, the frostworm has always been pretty terrible, so maybe he needs some love. But yeah, honestly, if Norsca didn't get any new units, I wouldn't be that bothered. What would be nice, though, is some new legendary lords, legendary heroes. Maybe, although I don't think it fits with the tabletop, some heavy cavalry would be really nice for Norsca. That's the kind of one thing they're really lacking. They've only got the skirmish cavalry, obviously. So yeah, Norsca, a faction that maybe needs more love in the campaign than it does in the army and the battles, but still one that just hasn't been touched for a long time and needs just a little bit of sweet loving. Last and definitely least is where elves belong, but I do have to say that the Dark Elves do need some love. On the campaign side of things, again, I can't comment massively because I don't really play them. It's against my religion. Gork and Mork would be furious if I played elves. The slave system, though, I think still kind of works okay. Generates a good bit of money if you do it right. Just like slavery in real life, I guess. But it's such an old system at this point, I'm sure they could revise it and make it better, maybe make it a little more complicated and intricate, make it more interesting. And then there's the Black Arcs that even I can say as the world's leading elf racist that these are pretty cool. I don't think there's maybe much to change here, but as I say, any Dark Elf players, let me know. If maybe I'm wrong, maybe the community thinks otherwise. I don't know. I don't keep up with things. The only thing that does strike me with the Dark Elves is the movement range of the Black Arcs. It feels like that should be a little bit more, so they are kind of more superior in the water with more movement range, able to catch up with everyone else and just get to where they want very quickly. But otherwise, these are probably fine, I guess. And then there's the Sword of Cain mechanic, which has maybe changed a bit over the years, so perhaps that needs a revision as well. But what's more apparent to me with the Dark Elves is their army issues, because there are a few. They've got some good stuff in there. They got some good infantry. Their missiles are some of the best. The Dark Shards, the repeater crossbows. But where their army can really fall down is in their monsters, of which they do have a fair few of, but some of them are just downright useless and have never really been that great, like the Bloodwrack Medusa here. This thing, as you can see, getting stun-locked by missiles. I wonder why it's useless. And then you've got the Hydra, which has never really been that great. The Charybdis is good if you can get it in a one-on-one fight with another single entity, but otherwise, meh, not so much. And then there's the Murderous Mastery, the unique battle mechanic for the Dark Elves. This has always been kind of rubbish because the bar fills up and then it just goes off. Whether it's a good time to do it or not, it would be better, I think, if it was more like the WoW, where you can just activate it when you want to, when it's more of a better time to do it. Because that extra control can sometimes go a long way. Although it does last a minute and a half, so, you know, you got it there for a while. But I still think this could most definitely be improved upon. So yeah, Dark Elves, perhaps just some smaller changes needed, but it's been a while for them, so give them something, goddammit, the poor little stupid elves. But there we go, the 5 factions I think that should be next in line for some love. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think. I'll see you in the future.